Today, we're going to tie this dahlberg diver. I know there's about 100 different tutorials out there, but I've been working on these a lot the last, couple years, and just always trying to get better, and just wanted to share some tips of what's helped me tie some better bugs, and I hope it helps you. But let's get into it. So I use the B10S Gamakatsu. I like the 2/0. I've tried smaller hooks. I've tried size 1, size 2. I just think the 2/0 is a little bit beefier, a little heavier, and it allows the fly to keel over better. I found when I'm tying on the smaller hooks than this size that a lot of times if your bug lands upside down, it will not, recorrect itself, which really sucks when you get it in the right spot where a fish is, and you might get a poor presentation. So I would recommend the Gami B10S 2/0. Anyhow, I've been really liking these bling rabbit strips here. A, you get a little bit of flash. B, makes the rabbit a little bit stiffer, and it doesn't foul like ever. It's pretty sweet. So for thread, I'm using some GSP. I use the 150 denier or the 200. Both work. I think right now I have 200 on. Nice strong thread is what you want. I just take the rabbit strip and just kind of taper the tail. Alright. I just start the thread on these towards the hook point. Give it a few wraps. Dab of super glue. And tie the rabbit in nice and tight. Been really liking this flex hackle. Oh yeah, here's the rabbit strips. These are both from the Orvis store, but I think other brands, make them. You can find them at your fly shop or online. I just cut a little bit, I don't know, 1.5 inches or so. It doesn't take much. Sometimes I'll put a little, hot red feather or whatever. But this flex hackle stuff's kind of cool. I don't know, smallies love rubber legs, right? Just wrap this forward a few times. Doesn't take much. Stuff's awesome. Look, there's like 50 rubber legs on there in just a couple wraps. A lot of these will be hidden by the deer hair anyways, but I fished this bug towards the end of the summer. I've been tying it in a bunch of different colors, and they all seem to work, but for some reason, I really like yellow when it comes to smallies here in Minnesota. Yellow, black, or some naturals with a hot spot in it, like some orange or Also, I don't have, this is the Renzetti Traveler Vise, and when we're really cranking on this thing with this GSP thread, I don't have the biggest base on these Traveler vices, so I've been just taking a C-clamp and just putting that on the base. Now my vise isn't going anywhere. All right, so I start by, wish you could see this, I need a cameraman, but I start by taking a clump of deer hair. The better deer hair you have, the easier these are to tie. This is a primo deer hair strip I got from the Fly Angler in Blaine. Best fly shop in town, in my opinion. They got the best selection for fly tie materials, and those guys over there are great. But these strips are awesome. They're like, I don't know, 1.5 feet long, and it's just primo stuff. Anyhow, so I cut that off right at the hide, you know, as close as you can get to it. Then just take a brush, and it's really important to get all that underfur out of there. All right, and I think I got like, I don't know, a little bit bigger than a pencil when you pinch this together. I've found, you know, you want to go not too much bigger than that per clump that you put in. Otherwise, you're trying to crank down on it, and you can end up, you know, exploding these fibers if you put too much on at a time. But I want a big enough chunk, because this is just going to go on to the bottom of the fly, and I'm going to stack a bunch of layers on top. But, you know, a little bit bigger than a pencil. I do 2 loose wraps, and it's important to keep your bobbin, you know, pretty close for this part, because I'm going to walk this deer hair around to the bottom of the hook, just like that. I'm going to put my thumb right on top here, and I'm going to pull down and kind of towards the shaft of my vise here, and just kind of pull that way, and you'll learn just the right amount of tension the more you do this. You know, when I first started, I would just crank on this, and a lot of times you just explode your fibers. So you just tight enough where you're not going to break the deer hair. All right, and this is super important on those bottom layers underneath the hook there, that every time you do the bottom layer, it's a dab of super glue right on the middle there. Let it kind of soak in, and that's going to keep your bug from spinning on you. You know, once you start fishing it, and you put a lot of time into these deer hair bugs, are super fun. But when I first started doing it, I wasn't putting enough glue there, and I wasn't putting enough thread, you know, as I'd go forward, and this would twist up on me, and it was super frustrating. So very important step there. All right, now I'm going to start stacking hair on the top of the hook here. I'll take about the same size clump, and you just repeat the process. You just brush all that underfur out with the brush, use your fingers. I think one of the things I learned, or just doing this over and over again, is you start to get better at handling the material, you know, handling it better and keeping everything straight. And it helps to keep, you'll get a cleaner looking bug the more you work with this stuff and learn how to hold it and keep it from, you know, getting uneven on yourself. But I'll match the tips up there. And I start by pulling down, make sure I'm tight again, and then I'll just wiggle through, up and over, and I use my bobbin to go straight down, bring my thread through. I'll wiggle up through, bob and go straight through, get my thread through. Give another wiggle. Now I just place my thumb right on the top, and you'll take your index finger and kind of pull up on the eye of the hook. That way you can really, crank down on this thing without the hook bending on you or the hook coming out of the vise. All right. I know they make better vices that'll really hold the hook better, but this Traveler has worked great for me. It's what I have, and clamping it to the table and pulling up on the hook while I pull down really helps. All right, now we're not going to add any more glue until we get a little bit further on the fly. So I'm going to take another clump of black, and stack it on top. So if you take your scissors, I like these Fiskars ones I got from the craft store. Got a little bit longer of a blade. They're actually, I've had them maybe over a year and they're still super sharp, but you can use your scissors to kind of press this stuff down and make room for, so you can see and make everything even. I'm going to stack that on top. Pull tight with my thread again, and then just gently wiggle through, thread through, wiggle through, thread through. And it's important you're trying to get the thread on each stack to always go through the same path. That way you avoid trapping fibers or getting them fold over on themselves. And then you'll end up, when you go to shave the bug with a razor with deer hair that's, caught on itself. And that happens sometimes if you're not careful, but it's all right. It still fishes. But that's something that you want to pay attention to if you're trying to get a cleaner bug. All right, we're going to add some other colors here. I'm going to go with orange. There's a lot of underfur on that one, so I'm really going to take my time and try to get as much of that out as I can. Sometimes if you lick your fingers a little bit, you can get a little more grip on that underfur and extra hair in there that you don't want. Get it out of there. All right. So, take your scissors again, line that up. Looks about like that, so the fibers are somewhat even. Pull tight again, wiggle through, bob and go straight through, thread through, wiggle through, thread through. Oh, a lot of this is super repetitive. We're just stacking and stacking and stacking. Next, we're going to take a little yellow. Same thing. Get all that underfur out. And the more hair you keep putting on, the more kind of messy this becomes and harder to work with. So just taking your time really helps. Same thing, wiggle through, thread through. Just 2 wraps is all I do on each little stack of deer hair that I'm putting in here. Just 2 loose wraps, finger on top with my thumb, index finger on the bottom of the eye of the hook, pulling down towards the base, the shaft of my vise over here. All right. I'll do one more on top here. Go back to black. And when I'm doing the different colors, I already got 2 solid, clumps of black underneath all that. And so I'm kind of doing, a little bit smaller than a pencil or even less than that with these colors when I'm adding other colors in there. So. Wiggle through, thread through. All right. Oh. So this part is very tricky to get your thread out in front of all this deer hair and get it all pushed back without trapping any fibers underneath and without breaking your thread. I've found if you take your scissors again, or I guess you could use a bodkin too, but if you just kind of slide them right underneath the eye of the hook, or underneath the bottom of the hook, excuse me, and you can just kind of push those fibers back on the bottom like that. And what that does, it just gives me some room where I can kind of pinch all the deer hair on the top and just pull it back. And I can push a little bit towards the back. I'm just kind of packing that back on the hook. And now you want to pull really tight and make sure you're tight against that hook again with the bobbin, and start wiggling. And I'm pulling tight while I'm doing this, wiggling, and I'm just going to go up and over the shank, and I'm going to pull down really tight. I pulled a little too tight there. See, I broke some of those fibers, but that's okay. And that part right there is a little bit tricky to do, and it's taken a lot of practice, but it's really important that you get those bottom fibers out of the way, pull the top ones up, and you're pulling really tight when you come around to that shank again, and then you really want to snug that in. Otherwise, it's really easy to trap the deer hair, and it'll fold up on itself, like I mentioned before. I think we did all right on that. And this is MN Fly Tool hair packer, and I'll use that to just kind of push some of this back. And then I'll just take, I'm taking a couple wraps at a time up here in the shank towards the eye, and then I just slide them back. Just kind of adding some thread down there, getting everything tucked back. And I'll just throw a half hitch in there. And then slide it back towards the hair. Okay. Got a couple fibers trapped. Going the wrong way. There we go. You want to take a dab of super glue. You get it on that thread base that you just made and kind of push it all the way up into the deer hair there. I screwed this up too, and I used the packer right after I did the glue, and I kind of got a little gunked up, which sucked because you want this nice and smooth, because you're going to use this tool later to do a half hitch on the eye of the hook, and I had to kind of sand it out and smooth it out again. So don't use your packer, you know, right after you use your glue. You can just use your fingers and just kind of push all that back. Add a couple more wraps. And that little bit of thread base is really going to help when I put this bottom stack on. It's going to help when I glue it and I have something to stick to versus a bare hook shank. That'll keep your bug from spinning on you. All right. So another decent chunk of black. A little bit bigger than a pencil again. And I'll just take the scissors and I'll cut off those tips. So we don't need those. It's super important, just hold on to that hair, pinch it super tight when you're brushing it, so you don't pull some of the deer hair with the comb out and then you get, you know, it super uneven here. And if that does happen to you, you know, like say it looked like that, if I just kind of lightly hold them, I can kind of push it against my hand and even them up close enough. Like, you don't have to use a packer, a deer hair packer tool. But see how I got them somewhat even again? All right. So if you pinch your deer hair so you're just about at the middle, and I'm going to hold this, you know, kind of at an angle against the shank here, and I'm going to do like a couple pin traps where I trap the thread in between my thumb and the fibers so I don't start flaring this out too soon. So wish you could see this better, but I just put the thread in between my index finger and the materials and pinch it there, and then I'll go around to find the bottom of the hook shank here. So I'm pinching that thread between my finger and I'm keeping it, you know, nice and loose. Loose wraps. There's one. Find that thread again between my finger, and there's two. And now I'm just going to kind of spin my thread down here, and I'm just kind of bringing in that slack until I get all the way to the shank with the tip of the bobbin there. And now I can walk this up and around. So now all that deer hair is on the bottom. And I'll take my fingers and kind of slide this back, and I'll pull down and tight. And we want all that to be on the bottom, so just kind of pushing it down, sliding it back. All right. That's what it looks like. Let's see that. So now I'll take super glue and a couple dabs right there on top. Another chunk of black. Cut those tips off. All right. Now, what I've learned about this, when you're adding farther into the fly, and I'm trying to put more deer hair onto the top of this shank, what happens is I have this kind of in the way, and so when I'm tying this in on the top, for at least for the first stack, you kind of have to have it at an angle, and your thread will like to slip forward on you. And if you put your thread right on the middle, by the time you get it tightened down, it might slip forward on you, and you might end up right here with the super. It's super uneven. So I'll grab like the back third or so. That way, when it slides forward, it hopefully ends up, right in the middle, and we're somewhat even. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'll get tight with the thread again. I'm going to wiggle through, keeping it super loose still. Thread through. Wiggle through. Thread through. And you can see how that still slipped forward on me a little bit. It's not totally even, but it's not bad. It's close enough. Now I can, same thing, keep my thumb on the top, find that eye of the hook with my index finger, and pull down. Tight. Okay. Beautiful. And we're just going to keep stacking. Same process, each stack. Super repetitive, but if you just take your time, and have fun with it. All right. Making some room with my scissors. Wiggle through. Thread through. Wiggle through. Thread through. You can always, I'm just kind of not pulling it tight, but just keeping a little pressure, and you can kind of look around to make sure you didn't trap too many fibers underneath or anything. That looks pretty decent. Pull tight. All right. I'm gonna add some colors again. We'll do orange, yellow, and black again. Again, I'll do, I don't know, half a pencil width, a little bit less, and these colors. There's a lot of underfur in this orange hide that I have, so take my time with it. Try to get as much out as I can. If you don't take your time with that underfur, you just don't get as good of a result, and you'll get kind of some fuzzy fibers sticking out of your fly, and also I think it takes on some more water, and your bug won't float all day. So it's super important to get all those out. That's also, one thing when you're fishing these, to get them to float all day. Like, you don't need to use floating or anything. If you use enough deer hair and you use quality deer hair and you take the time to get all that underfur out, this bug will float all day, even after catching 10 fish on it. All right, making some room. Scissors. All right. Another thing I learned too is never spin your thread when you're making these. Um, it makes your thread a lot tighter and thinner, and it's easier to break through the deer hair when you're pulling tight like this. So just kind of keeping your thread the way it comes right off the bobbin, nice and flat, is the way to go. By no means am I like a professional at this. There's a lot of guys that are super, super good at this stuff that I've learned a lot from. Watching videos and going to fly tying events and stuff like that, and watching the pros do it has really helped. So I hope you get something out of this, at least a couple tips that make your bugs a little bit better. All right. Wiggle through. Thread through. Wiggle through. Thread through. All right. To get these colors to not kind of twist on you or fade into each other too much, it's important that you, when you're pulling down to tighten these, that you just pull straight down and back. And I'm holding everything in place. If I just pull straight down from here, a lot of times it'll want to spin on you, or your colors will try to find one. You know, if you're not careful, sometimes it, like this one I screwed up where it twisted on me because I wasn't paying attention, and it's not super clean, right? So making sure you pull down and straight back and keeping everything tight will help that. All right, we'll do one more little clump of black on top of this. All right, scissors. Wiggle through, bobbin straight down and through. All right, getting a little messy. Now all these clumps that I just put on, they're not like fully glued in yet, right? I mean, they're on there tight, but they can still kind of spin on you and end up like that one bug I just showed you where it twists. So we can make sure it doesn't do that after we get our thread up in front of everything. Do the same thing as I did before, just kind of pushing those bottom ones back, grabbing the top. Getting really tight with my thread here, wiggling up and over. And I'll shorten up my thread till I get pretty close to that tip, so I can just find the shank of that hook, and I got a couple loose wraps. And then I'm going to pull really tight again. There we go. And sometimes you end up with trapped fibers if you don't, wiggle it enough, if you're not pulling tight enough. And another thing that can happen, if you're not tight enough, when you're pulling on this thread, advancing it towards the front of the eye, getting in front of all these stacks, is that you'll end up with thread that doesn't get close enough to the shank of the hook. And then when you go to trim the bottom of the fly, you can slice through your thread pretty easily. Or you'll have to, watch your thread as you're cutting, and you won't have that big of a gap, a hook gap when you're finished with your fly. So that step is like super, super important. I'd say besides, controlling the deer hair in your hands when you're cutting it and placing it and getting everything even, that's really been tough thing to try to master. But that step right there, getting the thread out in front of everything, super tight, trying to keep that thread tucked up against, that hook shank as close as we can get, will really help the end result of your fly turn out better. Really get a nice wide hook gap right there. Otherwise, if your thread's not close enough, your hook gap might be a little bit smaller. You might miss some fish. So make sure you're cranking on that when you're advancing that thread forward. All right, anyhow, just packing all this back. I'm running out of room here. And so I don't trap fibers when I'm trying to build a little thread base here so I can glue everything down. If you bring that thread all the way to the tip of your bobbin, then you can kind of pull everything back and find that, just super tight wraps to the hook shank. You can find the hook shank better without trapping any fibers. Take that MN fly tool, hair packer, and really pack that back. So we didn't leave ourselves with much room, right? Maybe 1/8 of an inch there. I don't know if you can see that well, but we're going to try to put another stack on the bottom and one more on the top. And this part is a little bit difficult to get down. This can still kind of spin a little bit, so you want to look down from the top, make sure everything's even and it didn't twist on you. Take a little dab of super glue, get right up in there nice and tight. Beautiful. We'll let that dry for a second here. Alright, so we don't have much room here, like I said, so we don't want to put too much hair on and crowd the eye too much. So I'm going to go, I don't know, definitely less than a pencil width. Not much. Maybe let's call it a third of a pencil. That's a little much, but we're going to go for it. Take a couple of those out. All right, this part kind of sucks. When you're pretty crowded up here, it's a little tricky. I'll try to walk you through it to the best of my abilities here on tips on how to make this happen. So, pushing all that back. I'm going to do the pinch wrap deal again. You can hold these fibers. You don't have to hold right up to the hook shank. You can hold them off a little bit so I can see, but I'm pinching that thread in between my thumb and the fibers, and I don't have too much thread out of the bobbin here, and I'm gonna go right around, find underneath that hook, right around the eye. I'm gonna do one more, Okay. That's 2 wraps and my thread's just hanging out right underneath the eye. And I'm going to take my bobbin and kind of cinch or bring in the slack, if you will. Now everything's tight up against there. And I'm going to walk it around with the tip of my bobbin. And I'm kind of pushing towards the back of the fly here so it doesn't come off the front. So now we got it on the bottom there. Like it, and you always want to keep pulling back, down and back, so it doesn't come popping off there. We did it. So that's all on the bottom. We're going to do one more stack on the top, and then we're going to be done with the tying part. Dab of super glue on top there. Okay. So the only time I use glue is after you put a bottom stack on, and then after you advance your thread forward in front of all the deer hair and you're starting your next, section as you go up the fly. That's the only time you use it. Otherwise, you end up getting too much glue on the fibers if you try to glue, on top of everything, and you go to try to trim the bug at the end, and everything's glued together, and it won't work. So, all right, same thing. I have to go at an angle here because I got this in the way, and so I'm gonna, grab the back third of that. Make some room here. Wiggle through, thread through, and now I'm kind of pulling, keeping pressure. Oh, almost lost it there. Keeping pressure towards the back of the hook to keep that from sliding off the eye, right? Pulling back. All right. 2 wraps, got her tight, pack it back. And you could use like a pen for this, or they have different, hair packer tools. But this is awesome because you can see what you're doing, and you'll see in a second, it's like the best because you can half hitch on this to finish your fly. It's pretty hard to whip finish with all these fibers without trapping them. So this MN fly tool, I know Jay, he lives in Minnesota here. We fish a fair amount together. He's an awesome dude. Go support his company. It's an awesome tool to have if you're working with deer hair or tying any predator flies, musky flies, that sort of thing. This thing is great. Reverse tying deer hair, you name it. Anyhow, so I got the 2 wraps on that top part. Everything's tight. I packed it back. I'm going to pull tight again. Bringing my thread up a little bit before I do. And I'm going to bring my thread, or my bobbin, excuse me, the tip of my bobbin all the way, towards the eye of the hook. And just do a couple loose wraps. Pull tight. Just right up and around. All right. Take the tip of your fly tool, and you just like you do a half hitch around your finger, I'm just going to do that around the tool. Put that right up to it. Pull tight, and I'll just do that, I don't know, like 4 times, 5 times. Super sick tool. Look at that. Another thing you could do, if you don't have one of these, or you're trying to whip finish or hand whip finish, you could take a Pringles can, top, put that on there. I sliced a slot in this. I learned this from Andreas Anderson on YouTube, actually. It works pretty good to get all your fibers back. And then you could pull your thread out of that slot and whip finish or half hitch or whatever. But this tool works pretty good for just throwing some half hitches on the end, not trapping any fibers. Pull tight, and we're done with the tying part. Get all this stuff out of the way. I'd say use a fresh razor for each one of these. It's gonna make your life easier. I got a little waste basket here. So, flip her upside down. Hope you can still see that. All right, sweet. And I'll just hold my razor straight, and I'll kind of cut up at an angle, just so I can kind of start to see what's going on. You don't want to just slice straight through it right away. You want to kind of make sure you're not going to cut your thread, so start by cutting off little by little until you can see more and more of what you're doing. You can take that most of the way back. Just kind of a slicing, circular saw motion. It's hard to see. I have like one little fiber trapped in there. My thread's probably pretty close to that spot, so I don't want to go too much deeper. But I usually kind of angle them back. The farther I get back, I'll kind of run my razor like this just to make a bigger hook gap. And I know those first stacks of hair I put in, it wasn't such a mess, and I didn't have to, walk the thread forward. So I know like my thread all went pretty much on that same path and is pretty tight to the hook shank. So I can get away with, cutting down a little bit on this back half of the fly, just making that gap a little bit bigger. Still just taking off little by little. About like that. Looks pretty good. So there's a slight angle. I can almost see my thread through there, so I'm not going to go anymore on the front here. But flip her over. And I'm going to start by just cutting up at an angle there. If your blade feels like it's starting to get dull, you can flip it around or flip it over. All right, bent blade. Find the eye of the hook. And I'm just going to kind of saw it back and forth, going up. A little bit at a time. So I'll be a little modest. I won't go, too far back right away. Kind of look at the bottom, see it's somewhat even. All right. A little more here. Okay. Now you want a curved scissors for this and a steady hand. But I will start by trying to keep my hand in the same place, and you don't have to like cut this whole thing at once. I'm just kind of sliding it in there just a little bit, just with the tip. And I'm gonna start rotating the vise. It's like a better way you can see this, but try not to move your hand. And if I just keep going, little by little, rotating the vise, trying to keep my hand in the same spot, I should get a somewhat even collar. All around this whole thing. Drank too much coffee this morning, so it's kind of hard to keep my hand still. I'm trying to kind of balance it on this waste bin I have below here. Keep the scissors in the same spot somewhat. That wasn't my greatest attempt. I'm trying to clean it up a little bit. All right. Decent. All right. Now, I'm going to start shaving this on the top here. It's going to come back, I don't know, a little bit farther into this black and clean this up a little bit. If I kind of look straight down, I can kind of find a line and try to make it equal all the way across. Keeping your finger on the eye of the hook here is kind of clutch for keeping your hand steady. I just have the corner of that blade and we're just kind of sawing through. On the very tip of that blade, trying to get a nice uniform line going across top here to get a clean collar. You can tell there I screwed up a little. I got a little bit of orange that got trapped in there, but that's all right. Little fish. Looks pretty even. Try to clean this up a little better. You could spend so much time doing this, trying to get it perfect, but get you close. All right, now we want to kind of start cutting at an angle right here, all the way up and around. I personally like just starting at this corner here because I can see it's right in front of me, and I'll just take the tip of that blade and just start, sawing through it just like that, keeping my tip of my finger on the eye of the hook here. And I'll start at kind of a pretty modest angle, cutting down towards the back of this fly. And we can kind of sharpen that up a little bit as we go. So when you're cutting around this collar with that curved scissors, you're just kind of making a template for you to go off when you're doing this step. So getting that as even as you can will help. All right. So to get this angle, even with that, I'll flip it upside down. Then I'll just come straight down on it and just try to, eye it up. And trying to just match, these two angles the best I can. That looks, pretty close. And now I can just start working it this way and evening that angle out all the way around. Just little by little. Flipping that blade around when it's getting dull really helps this part. Well, looks kind of cool. It's not perfect, right? Good little fish. Now you can decide how far you want to go back. I think I kind of want to keep a little bit of black on top of that. It looks kind of cool. So I'm not going to go too much farther. Just trying to even this out. Almost done. If I pull these fibers back, I can get up in there and really get those kind of extra tips out of the way. Get her looking a little cleaner. Sick. It's all right. Spend a little more time even this up, but that's good enough, I think. Decent. All right. Put some rubber legs on this quick. I just have a sewing needle. It's actually the needle that comes with the fish pond replacement net. When you replace the bag on a fish pond, they give you a needle. And this is actually that one. It works perfect for this, for pulling the legs through. I'll just have some rubber legs here. I'm gonna grab 4 of them. Get the tips evened up and make sure they're all flat. These are like rectangular in shape, so you want to make sure they're all sitting flat to get them to go through the needle easier. Get them as even as you can. I'm going to slide all 4 through that needle. Leave about a ½ inch out and just pinch it there. Flip her on its side. I usually kind of go somewhere back here in the collar. You could go up there too if you want, but I like my legs somewhere in there. And you want to go as close to the top of that hook shank as possible. You don't really want to like force this or pound it through. You can break your thread and destroy your fly. So just kind of keep poking around until you find a spot. That one I found on the first try, luckily. Just pull that through. Pull straight. Now, once I get the eye of that needle through, I'm going to grab it by the rubber legs so I don't break them and pull them the rest of the way through. Pull the needle off. Those look pretty even. You don't need to glue this or anything. I haven't had any problem with these coming out. But boom. Legs. Done. We're pretty much wrapped up here. Flip her over. Got my crazy glue, and I'm just gonna brush and kind of push some of that glue. Just kind of stay in the center. If you go too far out, I've had where I glued out here and the bug ended up just breaking off, on that corner. So I think keeping your edges a little bit softer will help the longevity of your bug. And I've also had this, I don't know what, it's like chemical reaction of something, but with the glue and I don't know the dyes and the deer hair or what it is, but sometimes this kind of like smokes a little bit for some reason, some sort of chemical reaction. So I try not to be up close and personal with it, breathing those fumes in, because I'm sure that's not good, but kind of letting that soak in. I'll leave the bug upside down for a little bit and just let that soak in. And then I just dab some glue up here on the front of the fly, making sure that thread gets glued in nicely. You could take a feather, or I just use this bodkin, and I'm gonna poke through the eye of the hook, make sure we're got no glue in there. Careful getting glue on your rubber legs too, because that can kind of ruin them. So I'll let that dry for a sec here. That's it. There's the finished bug. Turned out pretty decent. Hope you liked it. Hope you learned something or got something out of it. I don't know. I just love tying these things with the deer hair. It's super fun. Kind of becoming obsessed with it a little bit. Just trying to get better at it, but. All right, we're out. Thanks for watching. Larry's out.